and that's us live. First of all, welcome to Michael Bell Senior. I'm going to say it's great to have you on. Like I've just said a moment ago, in a way, it would be great if we weren't having this conversation. But unfortunately, events nearly 18 years ago conspired to well, I suppose. Well, would you like to tell us your thoughts on the last 18 years and what happened in your
Yeah,
efforts to get?
well, first, Paul, thank you. Your interest and the people around you, their interest in this matter is important because we need to create a tremendous amount of pressure by focusing on this one particular shooting here in Wisconsin, because essentially the whole system can fall based on just one bullet, and
Yes.
that's what we're looking for to happen. 2004, I had a son that was coming home from a night out with friends. He stopped in front of his own house. An officer who he had a scuffle with several weeks before arrived right behind him. As Michael turned off the car and was getting out of the car, the officer screamed, "Get back in the car, get back in the car." Michael, dazed with the spotlight in his face, hesitated just a moment. The officer grabbed his neck and started pushing him back in the front of the car. When the officer saw that there was somebody else in the front seat of the car, he changed his mind and pulled Michael away, pulled him out of view of the dash cam, and he started accusing Michael of speeding and running a stop sign. And later in court, he testified that that was not the case, that he had to retract his statements regarding speeding because my son didn't speed and my son didn't run a stop sign. You can hear him in the background being accused of wrongdoing. Michael said, "I didn't do anything wrong. I know my rights." Eventually, you can hear the taser popping. You can hear my son saying, "Why are you kicking me? Quit kicking me." At one point, Michael screams very loud as he's tased again. You have to understand that the trigger on this taser was being held not just in small bursts like they're supposed to be, but we're talking 3, 4, 5 seconds or whatever. Michael, fearing for his life, started running to the back of his house. An eyewitness saw him with his hands behind his back. He ran to the back of the house. A motion censored spotlight on the garage lit up. A number of people heard the commotion. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. They looked outside their window and they saw what we described as a Rodney King style beating of Michael. They were just learning how to use their tasers. At one point, they went to tase Michael, and all the officers pulled their hands off of him, and they tased Michael. One officer pointed his gun at Michael's mother's face and said, "If you don't back off, I'm going to shoot you." At that point, Michael, it appears, might have rushed that officer to push him away from his mom. Michael was in cuffs. Michael was bent over a car. Michael was in the grasp of a police officer. And then an officer screamed, "He has my gun." And the eyewitnesses said, "No, he doesn't have your gun." Another officer arriving at the scene walked up, took his gun, placed it directly to Michael's right temple, and tried to fire a shot. He couldn't do it because the gun was pressed so tightly to Michael's temple. And then he did it a second time, killing Michael in front of his mother, sister, and 3 eyewitnesses.
Now, that's obviously hugely tragic. I suppose one of the questions I was going to ask, I know that you're from a military background. Generally speaking, I'm of the opinion that law enforcement, 90% of the time, maybe more than that they are quite good people. But it seems to me as if there's a huge problem with law enforcement in this case, in that they having got all this terrible situation has happened. It was then the cover up of trying to say that other things had happened. Could you take us a bit through that? Including, I believe, one of the officers actually tried to write a book.
Okay. Well, the police, the problem, first off, to address the background, I'm a military officer. I'm a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. I was a pilot. I served our country in Afghanistan. I served in Bosnia, Kosovo. I served in Desert Storm. And at first, I I was in disbelief that something inappropriate could happen, because being of a man that wore a uniform, I believed that everything proper was going to happen. But I found out that not the case, that they investigated themselves. They found themselves justified within 2 days. And I was
Wow.
very alarmed by that, because I knew that safety investigations in the United States Air Force required sometimes months of looking at
Yes.
the details. But this was just a group that just investigated themselves. And I also found out in the state of Wisconsin, there had never been a police department that ever found their own shooting unjustified in over 100 years. And
No.
that impossible record of perfection alerted me to some of the problems that were going on in law enforcement. But what we ended up finding out is that an officer hooked his gun or a part of his uniform on a car mirror. And somehow or another, he misinterpreted that tugging as my son grabbing his weapon.
Yeah.
There was no DNA or fingerprints on the gun or holster, and it's been verified even with modern day technology. And that the officer that killed Michael, he's still alive, but the officer who screamed, "He has my gun," committed suicide in 2010.
Wow.
And so instead of going back and saying, this was a very tragic situation, we might have made an honest mistake, they then covered it up. They then screamed. They then tried to fabricate evidence that Michael was trying to grab a gun, because of the positioning of the officers at the crime scene. They could not have the original layout the way they needed it to be, because how could an officer be grabbing somebody, or how can Michael be grabbing an officer's gun if that officer that kills him has to stand between the officer that was screaming, "He has my gun," and also Michael?
Yeah.
And so they took the officer and placed him on the front of the car, and they changed the direction of that. And so your listeners can go to michaelbell.info and see Forensically Impossible, and that'll give them a good clue. Well, to make a long story short, my attorneys knew this, and we waited 4 long years until we can get the officers under oath. And after all 4 officers lied in sequence, our attorneys handed the medical examiner's report to one of the officers. And after the officer just testified that Michael was shot on the left side of the head, and that the officer was in the front of the car and he had positioned his gun to the windshield of the car, he had to read a report that said that Michael was shot on the right side of the head. And at that point, their case started to unravel. They tried to create a reenactment where now they had to try to twist Michael's head 180 degrees in the opposite direction to get the bullet to match the crime scene data. And so we ended up settling out of court. They settled for $1.75 million. I used my entire portion of that settlement to change the laws here in the state of Wisconsin, and I've used far more of my own. But I tried to get them to open an investigation, but law enforcement just decided to sit on their hands and be silent. And so eventually I had to conduct our own investigation. I brought in a team of top-notch people. I have a man, his name is Russ Beckman. He initially was hired to do some investigative work, but he was so compelled by this scenario that he's essentially volunteered probably 10 years of his time on this matter, and he has put in a tremendous amount of work. So.
It certainly has. Just one thing that I remember seeing was that at one point the policeman said that he'd actually shot gangster style. That was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. When do the police get taught to shoot gangster style?
Well, what had happened is that the forensic pathologist noted that Michael had a bruise on his forehead where they shot him, and it was actually what they call a muzzle stamp of the gun. And when the police started to change their story and everything started unraveling, they had to go from the gun being held straight up like this to the gun being held like this to try to make their lie work. And so they actually went to a firing range, and in slow motion, tried to capture how the bullet was released from that chamber, because another problem that they had with their lie was a bullet was found in the exact direction that it should have been for the eyewitness statement, but it
Yeah.
was in direct contradiction to the officer's statements. So.
Yeah. And so I mentioned also that I heard that one of the officers actually wrote a book about the case.
A guy named Albert Gonzalez actually wrote
Yeah.
a book about the case. He's the officer that pulled the trigger. He has a history of being a troublesome officer. He was suspended for several days. If you go to Wisconsin CCAP, which is where circuit court access stuff appears when you have problems financially, that has showed up. He's never been promoted higher than that of a probation officer in a court setting, and he is delusional enough that he wants to run for sheriff in the county here. Well, at some point, he decided to write a book about killing Michael. He never cleared it through his department. He never cleared it through an attorney, and he ended up writing a book about killing Michael. And we went back to it. He tried to quote me from the court settlement, but he never even used the appropriate language that was there in the depositions. And so therefore we filed a libel suit against him, and that's still pending.
Wow. Excellent. Now, above obviously this is the Kenosha Police Department, is that right? It's not the county department, it's the police department.
It is the Kenosha Police Department, the same department that was involved in the Jacob Blake shooting last summer.
Yeah. And really, at the head of all of this is the Attorney General.
The Attorney General, several Attorney Generals actually, in fact, but they're nothing more than a political figurehead.
Yeah, I was going to say, was Brad Schimmel one of the awkward what's-its that you've had to deal with?
Brad Schimmel was one of the Attorney Generals, yes.
Yeah, and now I believe it's Josh Call.
And Josh Call is actually the son of the Attorney General that reviewed Michael's case in the beginning.
Yeah, Peg likes a lager.
Yeah, and she was found. She got caught driving under the influence, got a ticket, and then lost her job. And I find it amazing that when a 21-year-old boy, a college student, drives under the influence, it's a criminal act and everybody's against me. But when the Attorney General for the state of Wisconsin, who's well into her 50s with a law degree, gets a ticket for driving under the influence, it's a lapse in judgments, and we were expected to forgive that person.
Yeah. It's not. It's do as we say, not as we do, isn't it?
Yes.
But probably the one that sticks out most to me is the Sir Walter Scott saying, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." I mean, how many times did the story of the actual shooting change? How many different scenarios? They tried to do a video and a reenactment.
Well, under oath, the officers have changed their testimony over 19 times.
Wow.
There have been two versions of the shooting. The eyewitnesses' versions are unchanging. Not one word has changed. They are identical today as they were back in 2004. And I have a retired FBI investigator working on our case and regarding another matter. And I said to him not too long ago, I said, if you encountered somebody that changed their story 19 times and there was so many different contradictions in the evidence, what would that mean to you? And he told me, he said that there's a problem here. Yeah. And he told me the phrase that he used was, there's a rat in the woodpile, and we just need to find them. So
yeah. Now, so moving on. I know that you've done a huge amount to try and publicize this situation, and maybe if you could, I'll post the link in the description below to where people can go to see more information about the case?
Oh, absolutely. We're on Facebook, Plea for a Change, the Michael Bell shooting, and we're at michaelbell.info. And what's really important here is that in the beginning, I tried to keep an awareness on the case because I wanted law enforcement to conduct an investigation.
Yes.
They refused to do so. And there's been a cover up across the board. So eventually I had to bring in our own investigators. And then in 2019, the car where Michael was bent over and killed was finally moved. And I found the bullet impact location. And I suspected it was a bullet impact location. It matched the size. It matched all the other evidence. I contacted the Attorney General, and they sent out a team, and they said it's inconclusive. Well, I got that bullet impact location back returned to me. We secured the evidence to make sure that I had nothing to do with it, and I sent it off to the nation's leading ballistics expert. His name is Michael Haag, and he's out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Michael, the first thing he did was he ran a copper lead splatter test. And that bullet impact location tested positive for lead. We did multiple scenario testing where we tested all around it, and there was no lead anyplace else but only in that one spot. So we knew that we had the suspected impact location. And earlier this year, the city of Kenosha said, well, we looked at our photos from 2004, and that bullet impact location isn't there. We saw it. Our team saw it in other photos from 2017. So I finally was able to get an identical copy of photos printed from the negatives. I took those to a lab in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they ran them under scanners, and they could tell there are tonal anomalies at the location where the bullet was suspected to hit that particular piece of trim coil. And so now we have multiple photos saying that was there since 2004, and it also tests positive for lead. So our ballistics expert says, I want the bullet. And by testing the bullet, we can prove that the whole system has failed and that justice in this matter has never occurred.
Yep. Well, certainly for those of us that follow Making a Murderer, that ballistics expert that you're on about, Michael Haag, he features in Making a Murderer as well. So yeah, we do know about his expertise. But this release of the bullet, this is where we're at the moment, isn't it? You're trying to get the bullet released, and you've gone to amazing lengths to try and do so. Even going and speaking to the council, the city council, and offered a rather unique proposal.
Yes. Well, first off, is we had gone to the district attorney and asked him to order the release of the bullet, and he said no, he wasn't getting involved. And so then where the bullet is being stored, they said, well, we can only have the bullet released either by the district attorney or by the city attorney that's overseeing the police officers. And the chief of police and the city attorney have refused to release the bullet for outside examination. So then we had to file a court order, and a judge named Chad Kirkman, without even giving us a brief on any reason why he wouldn't, within 2 minutes dismissed our case, and so we had to send it to appeal. And so I had to go to great lengths. And so there was two strategies: try to get it the legal route, and the other strategy was try to get it through public awareness. Mm-hmm. And so I started taking out TV commercials. I started running ads in the local paper. I started running radio ads. I started running YouTube and Facebook ads. I have 12 billboards up being seen 6 million times here in the city of Kenosha. So I started really ramping up the awareness on this, and I've gone in front of the city council multiple times. And finally, I went in front of the city council, and because we know there are three things that's probably going to happen here. Number one, they don't want to release it because because the mayor and the former chief of police, who is now the city administrator, will be implicated in obstruction of justice and a crime. That's one of the reasons that we're looking at. Number two, they might be extremely worried that it's going to find them at fault, and there's going to be another multi-million-dollar settlement. And the third thing that we think of that is that it's just spite. They don't
Yes.
like me. I've raised awareness on this, and they're going to do this just to piss me off. And so I've gone in front of the city council, and they only give me 5 minutes during a citizens' comments portion. And so I have 5 minutes to make my case, and I think we've been very effective in doing that.
Yeah, you've given them an offer, which one of the councillors says we must take him up on this offer, and that's been a huge change of heart.
Well, and that is because I had discussions not too long ago, and people have asked me, said, Michael, what would you like in this case? And I said, the first thing we want to know is the truth.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to know is if somebody obstructed justice, will they be held accountable? Will that officer be held in murdering Michael? And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, well, I don't hear anything about money. And I go, because money's never been a factor. And he goes, well, why don't we just indemnify them? And so I made an offer to indemnify the city. I indemnified the insurance company that covers the city, and I indemnified the mayor financially if they release the bullet. So the only thing pending now, right, is that the mayor might implicate himself, or these officers will be charged. But other than that, and this is the first time across the United States where I've heard of anybody publicly willing to indemnify officers in an excessive force case. And so that's why this is important.
It's absolutely staggering. I heard a clip of the that clip of the lady councillor that got up and said, we must take up this offer, which was basically an admission to we've messed up here. It's time we stop messing Michael Bell Senior about and just give him what he wants, which is just the truth,
Her name was Holly Kangas. In the beginning, she had nothing to do with me because she was told by other aldermen to stay away from me. Mm-hmm. I made it very clear, but she heard me speak. She saw the evidence that we put forth, and it was very compelling. But you got to remember, there were 17 people on the city council, and she was just one of two women on there. Now she's the only woman on there. And to get up in front of a group of elderly white men who have this stoic opinion of themselves and call them out for what they did wrong, I'd say her courage matches that of John McCain and Liz Cheney here in the United States. Political figures that did what was did what was correct by justice and by the people, and not what was politically correct. So I admire her so much for her courage.
Yeah, well, just as we admire you tenfold for your courage in this. Now, I do know you told me a while back that you had met with somebody about the idea of Netflix covering this case.
I had discussions with a documentary producer. His name is Peter Hamilton out of New York. I also met with Tom Jennings. He's an award-winning producer out of L.A. Mm-hmm. And they have discussed a multi-series, either a podcast or further, regarding the shooting. But I essentially said, I'm interested, but right now the time is not right because our attention needs to be focused on getting to the truth. And as soon as that's over, then I can focus on telling Michael's story. So that's where we're at.
And also, I suppose, in fairness, you've got the complete story from beginning to end, and people will get to see the whole shooting match, as it were. Everything that went on, and so I really do hope that that the council see fit to take you up on the offer of indemnity, and if not, just keep on keeping on the pressure on them. Because these, unfortunately, sometimes trying to get to the truth does take a while, and it does take new people coming along, like this new. I mean, this lady councillor you're on about, she's never met you before, but now that she's heard you, it starts to change hearts and minds, doesn't it?
It does, and And I think some of those people are just frozen in time. They came up with an attitude, and they refuse to look at the evidence. And
Yeah.
and there's a history of problems here in Kenosha, and it's been clearly documented. There's been police officers taking bullets and putting them at crime scenes. There are people that were going into the police officers' files and looking at material. There's a number of bombshell issues that are going to be brought forward. Every 2 weeks, I promise to go in front of the city council and release another bombshell issue. And I know in 2 Mondays from now, I think it's the second Monday in May, I'm going to be releasing another bombshell piece of evidence to the city council.
Well, keep up the good work. I know that the Jerry Buting, the lawyer for Stephen Avery in his case, not the current lawyer, but the one featured in the documentary, he's also been following the case. So you do have a lot of people supporting you out there, even though you don't know them. So rest assured.
I'm happy to hear that. I really am.
Yeah, within this community, the sort of, what do we want? We just want truth and justice, for anybody, no matter who they are, what background. There are things that are going wrong that shouldn't be going wrong, and they're going wrong for various reasons. And you've got people then that try and cover up these mistakes, and it's all got to end, because you can't, as you say, if you've got a police department investigating themselves, and in the history of the police department they've got 100% record of being correct. Yeah.
And I want you listeners to know that I am pro cop. They have a very difficult job. And what I experienced in the military, they experienced many times over for years and years ago. And PTSD and those types of things are out there making their life hell. But more importantly, I'm pro-truth. And and this is what matters here. And by getting pro-truth here, we're going to make the system better for officers and citizens alike downstream. I've called for a National Transportation Safety Board style model for police shootings. Let's look at it. Let's find out what went wrong, and let's issue recommendations on how to avoid it from happening again. And that could be an outcome of this case right here. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the case over in Neenah of the
fully aware of it.
Yeah, the cycle shop owner, Michael Funk. Yeah. So that's another one that we've been trying to highlight as well. But as you say, all it needs is just not the department to investigate themselves, but to get somebody else in, and not somebody local, because again, it might just be a whitewash.
You have to understand that the aviation learning model and the law enforcement model are two different. They're very similar because things happen very quickly and they're very deadly. Yeah. But the aviation model started occurring in the 1950s, where the law enforcement model was actually brought over from Europe when people started settling in the United States. Yeah. I mean, that's where. So there's a 200-year history versus a 50-year history, but the new model has evolved and made things so much better. So that's something that we need to move towards in the future. Find out what went wrong. Like in my son's case, I believe an officer may have made a simple mistake. And in fact, I absolutely know that an officer hooked his gun or a part of his clothing on a car mirror and made a mistake. And then there was an order by another officer for them to shoot Michael. We have to look back at how did that communications affect the death of a citizen, and how can we change those communications so we don't kill somebody again? And that's what happens in aviation, and that's what needs to occur in law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, because you're on a, did you say you're on a smartphone?
I am.
Yeah. So I don't think you'll have noticed that to the side of me, we've got what we call the live chat. People that have joined in and then that have put comments on the side.
Yeah. I mean, the thumbnail I'm looking at is probably a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch in total height. So. And I'm 65 years old, and I don't have my little readers on right now, so I can't see that. Is there any questions that I can answer?
Well, it was just I was going to say, but that when you get the chance to, if you get the chance to watch it on a laptop or a desktop, you'll be able to see the live chat come up.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think even on when you see this video back again, I will just have a look. I don't think there was any questions as such. It was more just a case of people, in support.
Great.
We've got a wonderful lady from. I'm going to get it right. I'm going to say Minnesota, and I bet she's Michigan. But anyway, Linda.
That if it's MN, it's Minnesota. If it's MI, it's Michigan. Yes.
Yeah, it's Linda, Dr. Silkman. We've got a listener. So I'm in Galashiels, which is just south of Edinburgh.
Okay.
So Linda is in Minnesota, I'm sure, and if not, then I've got that wrong. We've got Dr. Silkman, who is in Adelaide, Australia. People following this case all over the world. Who else have we got? Linda, Doctor. There's a few other names popped up. Anthony D, good morning. So it must be America, because obviously we're in the afternoon, you're in the morning. Mystic Jinx, hi Mystic. We've got, and Lil Bob. Checking. Linda is Minnesota.
Great. Well, we have these listeners, and the way they can help me is this. All right.
Sure. Yeah.
Call John Antaramian, the mayor of this city in Kenosha, 262-653-4000, and say, release the bullet and the Michael Bell shooting. You have nothing to lose. We want to see justice in the matter. And when we can flood their phone lines with calls nonstop, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, then they will finally listen and know that this matter is so important that they can't just sit on their hands anymore.
Give us that number again, please, Michael.
262-653.
653.
653-4000.
So I'm going to just type that into the comment. Here we go. Anthony is from Arizona, although originally Wisconsin. So
262-653-4000. Or they can email him at mayor, MAYOR, at kenosha.org, and send an email to them and flood him. I mean, there was a case not too long ago in Madison, Wisconsin. In fact, it happened a number of years after my son's death. But when Change.org got a hold of it, there were so many emails coming in from around the world that it shut down their computer systems. And that's what needs to happen here. I know that in the Avery case, I talked with a reporter not too long ago, and he was interviewing then Governor Scott Walker. And Scott Walker said that there was over 150,000 pieces of mail that had come in over the Avery case. Let's make it 500,000 in regards to the Michael Bell case. Let's flood him. That's what we need to do.
Yep, absolutely.
That's how you can help me out there. I'm just a father fighting for justice, and I could use all that support.
Well, we would liken you to, for example, I don't know if you know the Ryan Ferguson case, but in that case, the Ryan Ferguson father, the lengths he went to get justice for his son, and at the moment, Daniel Holtzclaw's father is trying to do the same. Daniel Holtzclaw is a police officer who was accused of molesting women when nothing of the kind happened. Ryan Ferguson was simply wrongfully convicted. But in both cases, fathers like yourself, just going way beyond what you should have to do. You shouldn't have to be doing this, Michael, should you?
I know I shouldn't, but somehow or another, I've accepted this as my mission. And I kept thinking to myself, if this had occurred to an African-American man or a Hispanic woman or maybe somebody of Indian or Muslim descent, and they didn't have the resources, the education, or the courage to do this, there's no way that it could get done. There's just no way that they would have to just accept the injustice that occurs and have to live with that for the rest of their lives. And that's what so that's why I'm standing up tall here.
Yep. And you're doing a fantastic job. Michael, finally, I will once again, remind everybody it's Plea for a Change. The Michael Bell shooting is the Facebook page, and it's you did give me the michaelbell.info, and I will put the link in the description below for anybody to go and check that out. And please, obviously I'll keep in touch to find out what's all happening. I get notifications all the time, and everybody else that's out there, if you want to go over to those pages and lend your support, and as Michael has just said there, nothing beats letters and emails and phone calls to the mayor. What's his name again?
His first name is John, and his last name is Antaramian. And just a little note here, there's a little triangle. It's him, his cousin, who is the city lawyer, and it's the former chief of police are the ones that are controlling the release of the bullet. The three people that are implicated in the case are the three people that are controlling the release of evidence in the case. It's an amazing story, and public pressure needs to occur.
Yeah. I heard him, and I took an instant dislike to when he referred to the fact that Michael Bell saying he just needs to get over it, like hell he needs. No chance. You have no chance.
He made a comment, and he essentially said that I'm a grieving father, and I probably have some type of mental issue. I'm just paraphrasing him, and that I just need to come to terms with my son's death instead of him looking at the evidence that's really out there.
Yeah. It's cognitive dissonance, isn't it? It's making excuses for your inadequacies. Michael, I'm not going to keep you much longer.
Thank you.
And please just keep doing what you're doing, and please, hopefully you're feeling positive vibes from around the world, but Galashiels, Australia, all the sort of English speaking countries, and I'm sure others as well.
Great. And Paul, please make sure that I get a link to this interview so that I can post it on our Facebook page and allow people to see it. Okay. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'll do that straight away.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye for now. Bye-bye.